Believe it or not, considering its reputation nowadays, Kingdom Hearts 2 was produced in a relatively short 3 years, having both the original game and the sequel come out on the PlayStation 2. Nowadays, it took modern Square Enix nearly 15 years to get Kingdom Hearts 3 onto shelves, a period that was so long that the series completely missed the PlayStation 3. If you'd forgotten, then you may have risen an eyebrow, thinking that the PlayStation 2 managed to hold what Kingdom Hearts 2 ended up being as a game, after the original garnered success and people's attention with their attempt to combine the typical tropes and stereotypes of Final Fantasy with the iconography of Disney. The sequel was a further investment to capitalize on that formula and tried to launch the idea of the series in a completely random direction. It really does amaze me to think that the only games to come before this one were the original, which wrapped up the Ansem whole plot, and Chain of Memories, which introduced Organization 13 in a roundabout story about a group of idiots destroying themselves. And yet Square Enix's whack-ass division decided only a year after Chain to bring out Kingdom Hearts 2, and all the additions it would bring to the franchise. To say nothing else, this game is definitely a bold move. Beginning out of the gate with something completely brand new, KH2 starts with our first look at Roxas. Thankfully, I got both the brand new and the in-the-know experience with this Roxas dude, which made playing as him a lot more interesting in the intro. Please do go watch the 358 over 2 days video to know more about why this guy is so interesting and how this intro ended up being there in the first place. It is a daring move by Square Enix since they decided that instead of just getting straight into the game, they wanted to do some stage setting and build a larger intrigue with this scenario. In the release schedule, this was the first time we ever saw Roxas, so nobody knew nothing about this guy or where the hell he came from. He's just completely brand new. And the reason why this intro was a risky move is that Square Enix puts you in the shoes of someone you don't know and doesn't seem to be related to Sora at all for around the first 2 hours of the game. I can see people not liking this, since the start is so slow for a game that was more famous for hitting people with a stick. Now they're stuck doing things like trying to do odd jobs to earn summer money, competing in a sports competition, and being stuck with this visual novel slice of life story. I personally do love this intro though, mostly because it's centered around Roxas, the best protagonist of the whole series, and also because of the premise it's working with. This intro is actually pretty relatable to people who were at Roxas's age, just before 18, during summer vacation. The simple challenges that come with that time, needing to earn money to go have fun, trying to make the most of the summer with the little time that you have, and eventually getting bored with everything in your hometown, so you have to make up some dumb adventure to try and have a good day out with your friends to make the most of it. Plus, then you get the plot wrinkling of the intro, where these outside forces seem to be intruding on a possibly false world designed specifically for Roxas for some reason. The constant interruptions by Axel and the questions about Roxas's amnesia creates this perfectly paced mini mystery that, in spite of knowing nothing about it, ended up being quite captivating. Obviously, after 358, this intro only becomes much more meaningful, knowing where Roxas was before he ended up in a digital clone of Twilight Town. It's got the correct scenario, the dialogue, the timed interruptions by the outside world, and Roxas's confusion and eventual frustration at the whole thing to make this one of my favorite video game intros. But, unfortunately, everything great has to end, and so after things are fully revealed to the audience about what was going on inside of the digital world, the game eventually turns back over to Sora so that we can enjoy KH2 in our usual boring fashion. After the events of Chain of Memories and 358, Roxas essentially had to be arrested in this digital Twilight Town to give Ansem and Naminé the time that was needed to mold Roxas to the point that he could give up the part of Sora's soul, for lack of a better word, which would allow Sora to wake up from his hibernation. Axel kept trying to break in because he was missing his best friend and possibly being pressured by the Black Hood gang to get Roxas back due to the importance he is to their ultimate plan. But now, Sora's back, and due to the events of Chain of Memories in 358, basically all the important characters in this story have been shoved into the shadows, leaving Sora to his own devices, and since he's Sora, he has no idea what to do next. He shows up in Twilight Town, and Mickey needs to show up to push him in the right direction, back to Yen Sid, so that things can finally get back up to speed. The deal this time around is that a new threat has risen. This isn't going to be the game where Sora just goes back to Destiny Island and all of his Final Fantasy friends are going to be there. The problem that this time is the previously mentioned Organization 13, a society of nobodies who plan to do harm to the universe. The nobodies were added to expand on the lore of the original game, and they are the husks left behind when someone is killed and their hearts leave them to become heartless. The nobodies are usually mindless, they're beasts that work to kill things, possibly for the hearts that they're looking for. The organization is made up of special nobodies that were from people that were so powerful that they were able to keep their original forms despite being nobodies. The nobodies are things that aren't meant to exist and are basically just a state of Schrodinger's non-existence, a being that has none of its past memories or emotions, but continues to retain their powers and their appearance. Frankly, Organization 13 is the best thing that could have ever happened to Kingdom Hearts. Instead of boiling everything down to one villain again, Square Enix added an entire group of them to their story, along with the expansion of the lore from the nobodies to keep the world building interesting, since this new type of enemy creates its own new set of conflicts from the organization fighting for a right to exist, and then all of the members having completely different personalities that clash with each other and fight Sora in totally different ways, so we get both an entirely new set of villains to fight, along with an overarching threat that links all of them together. This setup is vastly more entertaining to work against due to the sheer amount of different ways that the organization can choose to conduct their villainy, either through the organization's main goal or their personal motivations. Which is a shame because due to this game being a main entry, the organization members are easily dispatched with one standout fight, whereas in other side games, they could end up taking several defeats from the Keyblade before eventually conceding defeat. It was an exceptional addition to the series, which is why the organization has stuck around for the rest of the franchise, always coming back for more, and just being retconned back to life. On the flip side, we come to the central issue with Kingdom Hearts as a series. The people who have interesting character arcs and behaviors are the people we don't see on the main screen. The organization is the great villain, and we only see them for bits and pieces, leaving us alone with the boring nothing that is Sora, and therefore the plot before we get to their HQ is actually pretty dull. After looking through all my footage, all I can really surmise is that Sora is going around to the new Disney World looking for more keyholes to seal in order to protect them from the organization threat, along with defeating any heartless or nobodies he comes across. It didn't really look like Sora was going around in his gummy ship with any real goal in mind, other that in spite of the organization taunting him and the other Disney heroes constantly, he's not doing any investigation or figuring out how to deal with the 13 who keep showing up, and in classic Sora fashion, he's just traveling around with Goofy and Donald waiting for plot turns to fall in his lap so that he can eventually get to his destined showdown with Xemnas. The side characters in this game are the ones that are actually pushing the plot forward. The organization members trying to figure out how to deal with Sora now that he's come back. Riku, who's still around off-screen doing some clandestine things of his own with Ansem and Naminé. The Final Fantasy Guild of Leon, Yuffie, Aerith, and others are the ones investigating to actually find the world building that Sora is too stupid to find himself. figuring out what the ultimate plan of the organization is, why nobodies are surging across the universe, the origins of some of the organization members, and how Xehanort ties into this entire malarkey. Unfortunately, developing the story isn't a focus in the game, and it's pretty much incidental at best, such as Ansem the Heartless not being the real Ansem and turning out to be a good guy working to study the darkness. Mickey's around at a few points, and his appearances either push Sora in the direction he's too dumb to find, or putting some puzzle pieces together before abruptly leaving to meet up with Riku. What I'm getting at is that even though Kingdom Hearts 2 is the game that adds the most lore to the series, the plot is characteristically token and often boils down to simply reliving the plots of Disney movies. Since this is a main installment, Square Enix finally gave us a good round of new worlds to go to. Mulan, Beauty and the Beast actually comes back, Tron for some reason, Pirates of the Caribbean, and of course, the downward spiral, that is the return of the Little Mermaid. A few of the old worlds return, and they do come back as the second half of their stories, such as Halloween Town moving on from Skellington, planning the perfect Halloween, to attempting to steal Christmas. Naturally, the movie stories are cut down very hard from their original IP. The levels are more expansive than the original, so there's actually more to do. There's some more cutscenes due to the larger number of villains in this story, such as Maleficent and Pete, working on a different plan than the organization, so they are more engaging levels. You get tons more bosses, especially in the final mix version, and a lot more gimmicks to go around throughout the level in these combat encounters. Unless it's Atlantica, the increased production value for this game really shows and makes for some entertaining hack and slash. The combat in this game is the best improvement, introducing one of the most robust combo systems that the series has ever seen, allowing players to choose from an immense list of combos and extensions to build the kind of combat they think is the most effective, and allowing you to mix it up as much as you want, just simply pulling from a stock of skill points that you distribute as you see fit when you need to change things up. And the additional combo moves easily fly into each other depending on what you've picked, making for some of the best acrobatic movesets that Kingdom Hearts was known for after this game. It is simply fantastic. A lot more animation work and balancing came to the table to make the player feel like a great badass, and also putting in an edge of tactics by making some bosses weak to more particular movesets. Also, it cannot be understated just how much the new reactions mechanic added to this combat system. These things have increased the cinematic nature of boss fights to unprecedented levels in this series. Outside of the final boss, one of the best reactions in the game is found in an actually unassuming encounter in the middle of the Beauty and the Beast level, where you fight a possessed chandelier, and the reaction that Sora uses to take the chandelier and use it to fling the boss across the room is what makes these things effective not only in actual combat, but also to increase that badass feeling of wrecking the boss with these crazy stylish moves. The reactions are exceptional because Square Enix built them to be unique to the enemy, which helps make each boss battle much more memorable, since you are always given access to a brand new way to destroy their health bar with these fantastic visuals. If nothing else, Kingdom Hearts 2 has the best combat design in the entire franchise. It's accessible, effective, along with still having that level of challenge, so that all of these tools don't make the game a complete cakewalk or completely ruin it by devoting so much time to the cutscenes that everything else gets forgotten. And on top of the redesign, you still have the classic features, adding additional party members in, several summons, and another set of Keyblades to collect for their stat changes. The individual levels with their focus on the Disney plots and the additional cutscenes do make them more satisfying experience, just a better video game experience because we do get to see things unfold in much more intricate detail, and they keep the pace up to keep us engaged. The bosses are more involved, they get more powers, and they get more combat gimmicks to keep us engaged with the plot's conflict because they're adding in their plot-related gimmicks into the combat to tie everything together. Most of them do it really well, and they're all unique enough to make the traveling to them exciting to see what's next on the plate, because they're all so different from each other. However, outside of the obvious failure of Atlantica, there was one level I did want to particularly shame in this video, and that was the Lion King level. I couldn't really remember doing this level the first time I played KH2 that's so long ago. This level is one of the last ones in the lineup, so it's the most optional. I'm not entirely sure if it is or isn't actually something you can skip, but clearly this one had major issues during design. It's really noticeable that either Square Enix couldn't get most of the original cast to come back and reprise their roles, or they were able to, but the actors either couldn't do the voices anymore, or they simply didn't give a shit. Some major characters don't speak at all, like the hyenas, Mufasa, or Rafiki, and when they actually get voice acting, you can basically hear the gear grind as you try to mesh whatever the hell is coming out of your TV speakers with your memories of the original movie.
So whenever you feel alone, just remember that those kings will always be there to guide you, and so will I.
It became so obvious when the character that got the most voice acting was Nala. Her actor did the best job out of everybody, and she had the most acted dialogue, which is great that someone came to the studio trying their best, but at the same time, it's Nala. She's a supporting character at best in the movie, and therefore it's a bit absurd that this is what happened in the game. This level ran into so many issues in execution that it honestly should have been scrapped outright. Compared to everything else, it's the most low quality, and sometimes it's actually embarrassing to see, which is a shame for one of Disney's best movies that didn't come out with the original game and was only available to see in video game form in this sequel. This is the first time we're actually seeing a level around this movie. And after all the Disney worlds have been resealed, Sora finally gets open to the organization HQ, an appropriately over-designed city that contains the organization's insane castle. The Disney levels have overall been quality stuff with all the bells and whistles that you would think in a well-planned sequel, but in Kingdom Hearts' original content, Square Enix pulls out all the stops. There is so much to do and see in the City of Nothing that it really is the great spectacle to cap off this entire crazy game. There's tons of regular enemies traversing the beginning streets, these impressive skyscrapers seen once you get to the main foyer, encounters with some of the remaining members attempting to stop Sora from completing his destined meetup with Xemnas. Tricks and traps abound once you get up to the castle. In the interior, we start meeting up with our lost friends, Riku and Kairi, and finally revealing some of the organization members' motives, with the important one being Axel, who lost Roxas and was subtly subverting the 13's plans for his own gain before being destroyed himself. Riku, Kairi, Ansem the Wise, and Mickey all make appearances along with Maleficent and Pete, just not letting the opportunity go to waste and providing their own plot twist right when they needed it the most. Hell, at one point Sora has some sort of final spiritual battle with Roxas to prepare himself for the stress of finally facing off with the Master, Xemnas. And Roxas forcing this duel is the emotional part of the journey, with this being the end of the road for Roxas, using the battle as that final moment of realizing that his existence was taking away bits of Sora, and he's standing in the way of the greater good. It's the final point of his character arc, for now. The City of Nothing level is just a crazy ride, and finishes with an overblown and crazy 4 or 5 part showdown where Riku and Sora are fighting a dragon, the reactor of the castle, a nobody king, and eventually getting around to where Xemnas was hiding this entire time. This battle is the pinnacle of Square Enix's physics-defying combat design with the most memorable reactions, where you get to cut buildings in half, co-op attack with Riku, and of course, the famous Sphere of Lasers attack that finishes Xemnas' final phase of the fight with an explosive finish. When anime ridiculousness is used in the right way, it can make for the best of set pieces, and Kingdom Hearts 2 finds that balance, and I love the hell out of it. Not a lot of final bosses can make all of that work without a hitch, so it is super satisfying to finish this off with some of the most ridiculous encounters that you could possibly have thought of. So yeah, if nothing else I wanted to say with this video, Square Enix put their nose to the grindstone, they planned hard, they worked smart, and slaved away to make this game a reality. One of those games that threw everything and the sink onto the design table and somehow managed to piece it all together into a game with constantly changing and rising action, all these different conflicts, and instead of a different project that tries to do this similar thing and looks the fool when it's an over-designed mess that doesn't work as intended. So it is super remarkable how much this game just snaps and works like clockwork. I can't imagine how much effort it took to get all of the new combos animated and balanced, along with creating separate reactions for every enemy in the game along with their different gimmicks. And on top of that, you have all these new cutscenes, the new characters and worlds they had to make, more worlds than the original game. They had to expand the old worlds to completely new level design, and especially the Pirates level, which had to have a totally different art style than the other levels, because that's the only one that isn't an animated movie, so they had to completely redo everything for the human characters. It's a constant cycle of new encounters, scenarios, and all these enemies to fight. This game has a ton of bosses in it, has to be more than the original by a substantial number, and across the board, it's exceptional that this game has such a good production, that all of this brand new stuff got put into it, and it works insanely well. The game that properly introduced Organization 13 to the KH fans was going to be the special entry in the series, the memorable one, and it shows through like nothing else. I couldn't have imagined a way that you could produce a better game, and it did exactly what it was supposed to do. Use the success of its predecessor to produce such a great sequel that it grabbed the attention of many more PlayStation users to whatever the hell this Kingdom Hearts 3 is about, and 15 years later, the niche audience comes out for the next installment, and it is a success. And it allowed Square Enix the clout to make 8 spin-off games, because why the hell not?